You on?
All right, good morning. Thank y'all for coming in today. The PowerPoint presentation I'm going to do is going to be talking a little bit about improving RTI for 7th grade students here at WS New Middle. The problem statement that I wrote down was WS New Middle School is struggling to show progress with students receiving response to intervention or RTI services. This lack of progress is reflecting classroom grades and state testing scores. The purpose of this study is to develop a fully functioning RTI strategy that provides the necessary instruction needed for lower functioning students at WS Neal Middle School. So basically what I had to do was come up with something that we needed to improve here at WS Neal Middle School. I talked to Dr. Ramback and she said this was one of the areas. The reason it's narrowed down to 7th grade is because if I were to do it a broad school-wide thing, it would be way too much data and all that stuff to get together. So we narrowed it down to 7th grade and it has to be followed for 2 years. So that's why I chose the 7th grade to do this. All right, the hypothesis statement: the students at WS Neal Middle School receiving RTI response intervention will show adequate progress while receiving the appropriate tiered instruction by highly qualified teachers in the subject area in which the students are at risk. So basically what we're going to try to do as a group is to improve the tiers, the kids that are on tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, we're going to try to improve them and move them forward. So that's one of the things that we're going to try to do. Some of the definitions, RTI, which is response to intervention, it's a multi-tier approach to the early identification and support of students with learning and behavior needs. Tier 1, which I just spoke about, this level of RTI is conducted in a whole class setting, so a lot of this stuff we know is done full on with all the class, with the whole classroom. Tier 2, you find yourself a little bit more targeting what they're struggling in. For example, you'll narrow it down to either reading, math, one of those things, okay? And tier 3, you're going to get more of the one-on-one individual instruction that you're looking for, okay? Some of the articles that I read to do this project, one of them was by Futchs and Futchs. The first necessary component of RTI is universal or class-wide screening, the purpose of which is to identify students likely to experience poor academic outcomes if their instruction is limited to classroom only tier 1 instruction. So basically, if you limit everybody to sitting in a classroom setting, you're not getting that individualized training or the individualized instruction that they need. So the second one here, those likely to fall somewhat below grade level by the end of the year may need a faster paced type of support, perhaps a bit of practice and review that supplements the core reading series. That's the hardest thing that we have as teachers is if a kid falls way behind, trying to catch them up and get them on level to move them forward to the next grade, right? I mean, that's the hardest thing that we deal with. So Castillo, March, Tan, Stockslager, Brundage, McCullough, and Sadness also said direct intensive PD and job embedded coaching does in fact increase educators' perceived RTI skills when implemented at a macro level. We don't have a lot of RTI professional development training. That's one of the things that we could do a better job of as a county, I think, is preparing us how to handle RTI situations a little bit better. The last one here, these 3 questions are something I wanted us to talk about a little bit. How do you think RTI affects learning? How do you think it affects the learning that we have here in our school?
Well, if it's done correctly, I think it would affect them definitely in a positive way, helping them out, giving them more one-on-one time.
Right.
If it's done correctly.
Right.
Definitely giving them more of the tier 2 and tier 3.
Yes.
Like Jennifer saying.
All right. What new practices are required of teachers for during RTI implementation? What are some new things that maybe you've seen or would like to implement as far as when you're doing RTI for your students? Is there anything new or anything that you see we don't do that you think we should? Or
I wouldn't call it new. I'd see one of those things. One thing I keep seeing and thinking about for next year is doing more stations. And in my head, I'm more secondary. I've thought a lot more that station teaching and doing that is more of an elementary thing. But I think we could hit more of the tier 2 definitely with more stations that you're meeting with a smaller group of kids and you can group them better.
right.
based on their needs, and hit a lot more, well, hit your tier 2 a lot
Okay.
more, maybe even time for tier 3,
Right.
depending on what stations you might have.
What I noticed is you guys didn't have a lot of tier 3 students in 7th grade this year that I found. Did have more tier 2 and tier 1 than tier 3, so. The last thing, how can a school and district leaders best support teacher problem solving under an RTI model? How can we get the support that we need in order for us to be successful when implementing these RTI strategies? What's some of the things that you think they could do as a higher up to kind of help us down here in the classroom?
I don't know if it's anything they could do. I wish we had more aides.
Mhm.
I think more aides in the classroom would help.
Right.
Would help split up. I mean, we need more bodies to, I don't know if that's reasonable or even
Right.
possible.
Something to handle the class size a little bit better
Mhm.
than would be something.
And not just here, this is what we need, do it. And that's
Right.
that's what teachers face every day, not just with RTI, it's with everything. Figure it out. Well, if you've never had to deal with that or never had to do a true RTI model, I don't ever remember myself sitting in a classroom where I had differentiated instruction, where I had anybody. We didn't do that. So how else am I supposed to see it besides there's always a shortage of time
Right.
and resources. So maybe more of the PD.
Okay.
Definitely more PD too.
All right. So definitely more
Here's
PD
some
and things like
ideas.
that would help out. All right. The action plan, this is kind of letting you know what we're going to be doing. The students involved in this study will consist of strictly 7th grade students. Like I said, this has to be a project that I hold on to for this year and next year. So that's the reason it was chosen. These students will also be currently receiving RTI services for either math or reading. That seems to be the big thing that you have that in. I mean, not many kids are failing social studies, and I know the science, you do test on science, but social studies, you don't test on that. So that's kind of where we see a lot of the RTIs, math and reading. The design in this study will use both proven and experimental techniques to improve the performance of students receiving RTI services. With this, I would like for us to kind of do more experimental type stuff than necessarily I guess kind of the same old, because if it's not working, then something's not right. So, overall, we will meet once a week to discuss what techniques are working, how children are progressing, and discuss possible new ideas to help with improvement of RTI for our 7th grade students. Just a little quick meeting and stuff like that to kind of get some ideas, bounce some things off of each other. So, this is kind of the timeline laid out. This is basically for next year. I'd like for us to meet at least once a week, every month. Review the students, talk about a little bit about how they're doing, things like that. In-class assessments, how are they performing on your tests? I know some of you do some type of assessment other than just classroom assessments. So we could pull those up and see how they're performing in that. Observations, I'd like to come around and look at those students and see how they're performing or see how they're acting in class, see if behavior may be some of the reason they're not performing as well. Professional development, I put this up there twice. Hopefully I could find something that we could kind of do online or something like that possible. And then the state assessment, we'll see how these kids do at the end of the year. So, with that being said, that's kind of the plan. That's the idea. I appreciate y'all helping me out on this, and hopefully we can see a difference in it.